Everybody, my name is Clifford Barcliff, an engineer here at Veritas, and now we're going to run in and actually see a running live environment. First part of this demo, we're just going to look at the product, what it looks like, point out some of the things that we designed to go back to those attributes that I mentioned earlier, orchestration, automation, visibility, risk management, rehearsals, that all important other R word besides resiliency rehearsals. So we support, today we do not support IAM yet. That's a request from our customers, but we support LDAP. And AD when it comes to user management at either end. There is a request to start using some of the native. Eventually, when we do cloud to cloud, we'll have to support the native security policies as they are. Today, most customers just map those things up front, but from a user standpoint, the user is still being authenticated. User being authenticated on what they can see, what they can touch, the operations they're allowed to perform, the kinds of reports they can run, so it's role-based access. And there's a long, exhaustive list of the kinds of things that a particular user can do. Again, if you think about the world out there, there's many restrictions on separation of duties. It is not multi-tenant as it exists today. We expect to do some re-architecture to make it truly multi-tenant, but from the end user standpoint, from a particular customer, everything is separated, everything is audited, it's all actions. Adding things, deleting things, changing things, another requirement for our customers when you're touching infrastructure. A set of resiliency managers in a domain, you can have multiple data centers and multiple connections. So those connections are from, we have a data center down south, and it's going to AWS West 2, I think, is where these objects exist. Customers, though, many of our customers have many different data centers, many different points of point. So I could have Azure assets and AWS assets, AWS East, AWS West. So as they add in data centers, they'll see the links. The links get created when they add in replication and define some replication, whether it's hardware-based on-prem or ours for the cloudy stuff. And so they'll see, hey, these links are between data center A and data center B, another link, data center A, data center C. Again, right now, objects can only get mapped to one link. In the future, we'll let them map to multiple links. So I will go right away. And just so, again, we talked about a platform. We had to include a lot of moving bits to support to get to that you mentioned earlier about what does the customers want, where do I win when I get close to 100%. So a place to catch all of the different things that make up a customer's environment. Most specifically here, things like different data movers, different virtualization technologies. This is where a customer would actually do some of the heavy lifting when, hey, I've got 3 different data movers and I want yours. And I've got several sets of clusters that I want to, V clusters that I want to manage. This is where they, point with the right credentials to suck in the bits to those various management consoles. This is where, so we support multiple different storage technologies. So we prompt users through. This is what you need to do and suck in the right bits. And that list changes all the time. Let's see. So we have here, I didn't want that one. This is DNS find. I'll find it in a moment. Later on, I'll show you the role base. It's a very large, you create roles, and then each role you assign, just like you might do in VMware. You have a role, it has things you can do within that role. You can plug and check and add and delete different things, create custom roles. Let's see, and then the other thing that's important here is this is where a customer can create service level objectives. This is where I can define how I measure things. So you see, I created an extra one and said, hey, I'm going to create a tier, a bucket, where lag is measured in 5 minutes. So only stuff that goes in here will only be measured and reported and pop up and give me red stuff on my reports when I don't meet that recovery point.
Could you walk us through like a typical workflow of how to use the
Sure.
product?
In just a second, I will. I have one more asset that's not defined yet. I'll suck it in and walk you through.
Okay.
In fact, let me just do it that way instead of. You'll see it as it gets consumed. So I have different kinds of assets. I said I have these resiliency groups, the smallest bit of asset that I manage. You can have lots and lots of things be in one resiliency group. That virtual business service, that's the blinking cursor, right? That's web services, application services, database services, Cassandra Database, all the things that make the blinking cursor work, you would fit into a virtual business service, and they can be arbitrarily complex from an orchestration standpoint. Hey, start these things, skip it. If this one doesn't work, don't care, keep going, but just keep trying. So we give customers a lot of options when they're doing start and stop. I can also change start and stop sequence based on where you are. I can change the order based on start, based on stop. So very flexible in orchestration. Okay. So I will give you, I have, I think, one unmanaged asset, and I'll walk you through what a customer would typically do. It's sitting on-prem. So I just have one asset. Again, small lab, there are 10 assets altogether. All the others are configured in different ways. So a customer says, I pulled one in. They can pull multiples in. Customers have thousands of VMs, so you can filter that list in many different ways to make it easier for a customer to find their stuff. So it's all ready to go, select, but if I hadn't selected it ahead of time, I would drag and drop it or click it. It already has discovered that this asset isn't already being protected in some way. So we discovered, hey, this is not living in some other data center. It's not living in another data center because it's being protected by some type of data protection product. It's not being protected because it's not being replicated by some other product. So we just tell the customer, hey, we have found nothing for this thing. It exists in one data center only. Depending on what I do here, workflow will change. What I'm going to do, the most common thing is I want to protect something from a wide area standpoint. And you'll see here that when I created these, I didn't have to create a bucket. These things about the targets are optional, but I put values in here. We also prompt people when they create these things, what's the applicable technology? So if it's a Snap technology that we support, you can't put 1 minute in there, right? You can probably only go to what the technology supports. So we make sure customers don't do the wrong thing.
Question real quick. I kind of need to back up a bit. When you're selecting assets, are there criteria to be able to select multiple at a time? Like select a cluster or a data center or folder.
Right. You can filter.
And furthermore, if something gets added to that construct at a later time, does it automatically make its way into this selection?
So we do not today say, hey, in this vCenter cluster, there's a new asset. Go ahead and stick it in this predefined protection group. No, we don't do that today. That is one of those things that we see with when we do put APIs, where a customer will be able to build that in. So as things happen, they're going to define it that way.
And you said a customer will be able to define it that way, so you're depending on them, the customer, to enable that functionality.
Sure, we haven't done things like queries where we do a query and based on the query, suck assets in. Do you think that's something should it be that dynamic? The reason why we haven't done it yet today is this is expensive to do, right? You're consuming resources from a customer standpoint. Sure. They're doing things. So we haven't come to a point where, based maybe on a query that runs every day, go ahead and update the grouping of the assets.
Yeah, there's got to be a balance between how you're impacting that resource and at least doing it on a somewhat regular schedule to provide that functionality. Mm-hmm. Would you say that you've seen that kind of demand from customers for that kind of feature?
Yeah. So the customer said, no, we want to consume an API to do that. That's what nobody has mentioned to me yet, I want it dynamic. They said, no, I want an API.
Can I chime in on this particular point, actually? I mean, this is the age of automation, right?
Yes.
And pretty much everyone that I talk to these days don't want to do any of this manual work, but they want basics, either tags, that they put a tag on their virtual machine and it automatically gets picked up. They need policy-based management. Say, okay, I've created a machine. I want it just to be protected. with whichever way. So I'll say tier 1, tier 2, or the priority 1, priority
Right.
2, and it automatically goes into a group and gets protected.
Yeah, so that is, again, the APIs, so whatever product they're actually doing to create that asset themselves, a line of XML code that says do a put, that's how they want to do it. So that, right, they're never touching the console. That's what the customers don't want to be living here, right? The person who creates and builds the field of dreams, they build the field, everybody else plays. But they want to do it that way through their native software-defined data center management tool. That's what they want.
Yes. So the point, again, so the question basically was that why isn't a machine when it's getting created automatically getting protected as well at the same time based on some sort of attribute?
Right. So again, there are too many variables for it to happen automatically. Like on a query, customers said, no, I want to control what gets moved and moved around, and I'll control it through my software-defined. So we just haven't exposed the API yet, but we expect to do that so that I won't do it through a query that happens where most data protection technologies just query and they see a new thing and they suck it into the data protection technology. It just happens, right? Nobody has to say, make a backup. But we're not doing backups here, right? I'm protecting a workload that's super important. So customers are much more careful. There's much more expense involved in consuming the new thing, right? Adding a new asset to a data protection policy is not that expensive, but all of a sudden flooding your network with more replication and consuming, storage resources and your cloud, there's cost involved. So they want to control that. They don't want it to be, they want to own it themselves, not us own it. Now we'll make it automatic by letting them just, plug it in through an API. Just do a put. So you have a bunch of things that say workload should be this big and it should have SQL on it and it should have this security. Oh, last line, stick it into this, policy, and it gets stuck in. I just haven't exposed that yet. But it's a request. Somebody mentioned earlier. It's a request from my larger customers. They're already consuming that software-defined infrastructure for building, destroying, and creating assets. They want it, so we will give it. But it's not proactive from our side. It'll be proactive from their side. That was he asked about proactive from our side. Just query stuff, and as you see it, suck it in. Where the customer is going to say, no, I want it. Go ahead and suck it in. Is that a better answer?
I mean, obviously, what you're doing, you're just saying what you are doing. What I was getting at basically was what I see.
Oh yeah, they don't want to touch this, right? They never want to see this, right? I agree. I loudly agree. They do not want to be playing with the console.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But okay. I mean, let's get on with the demo because that would, I think, bring more questions.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So again, again, different things. I could select one, so I'll select one. I select a data center. Again, I only have one target. I could have multiple targets. So at this point, I haven't committed to a target. So if I had multiple targets, that asset would get assigned to a different pairing of replication technologies. Right now, I just have one set of pairings. But it could be anything. I could say, at this point, I could still pick data center ABCDEF. But again, just one. Now, it's going to recognize, hey, to that particular target, the only thing that's valid at this point is our own mover. If it was an on-prem, and there was a possibility that there might be other data movers available, we would prompt them, which one do you want to use?
That's just based on static logic.
Yeah, well, we're correlating. So as we pull objects in, we're looking at the fact that this thing is not protected. And then we look at the fact that there's another data center. Is there a way to get from A to B?
Yeah.
Their correlation is sitting in a database and is being updated as things change. It's quite dynamic because we're always scanning, there's a regular scan schedule of all these different assets. Then the correlation happens, and the matrix gets built of how things are all looking at each other. Because I have two ways of moving to AWS, I do have two different sets of gateways. Just so you know, this was for demo purposes, that I have one going to direct storage, no S3 bucket in the middle, one that goes to an S3 bucket. From a user standpoint, there is no difference. There's no difference in capability, no difference in the experience. I'm just going to click direct because, just because. I have other assets that are going to the S3 bucket. I can select multiple gateways. I can select multiples of the same, and we're going to add this capability of spreading bandwidth across for really high throughput workloads. Those pairings, by the way, were done ahead of time. I didn't talk about that infrastructure, but all the pairings between data centers you do up front. All right, so I've discovered that I have a disk. I discovered what kind of size it is. Now, this is when you start picking the specific configurations at the far side. Right, to the gentleman's point, you don't want to be living in here. There's a lot of things to pick. Right, I don't want to have to be picking all these different options all the time as I pick assets. So right now, I can only go to the West 2A availability zone. But if I had multiple ones and discovered multiple ones, because we will discover all the AWS assets that are available to me, zones, networks, security roles. And then they're populated into these dropdowns. I could have picked different kinds of disk. So we support all the different technologies at each different vendors.
Again, are you pulling down that information dynamically or periodically? So when you drop...
Yeah, that drop down is what's discovered. So these don't, I mean, what's available from, as long as it's available in the account, from the account standpoint, then we discover it and it is populated. If it was deleted from the account, the ability to grab that kind of a disk, you wouldn't see it.
So what I mean is that if you're going to AWS, if you're selecting certain objects, say this security group
Right.
or this sub.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's dynamic. That's being polled on a regular basis. Probably, I think right now default once a day. Look for those kinds of things that might change once in a while.
That's not dynamic in my view. That dynamic is when you're basically just dropping down and it actually does an API query at that point to pull down whatever information there is.
Okay.
It's sort of static in a way on a periodic basis then, because it's not live information, which could create issues sometimes because people can delete subnets, for example, which may not exist while you're creating this.
Okay. Joanne, can you? Okay, thank you. Good suggestion, thank you. I have actually been the victim of certain things in our labs where something in our lab disappeared halfway through something, and all of a sudden I had a corrupted object, and it no longer would work properly. I had to recreate everything, and you reselect everything, delete it, and reselect everything. So anyway, you pick all your various things. I think I always just picked just general purpose. I don't want to have my lab person freak out on cost too much. Keep it small. Again, the security groups, instance types.
Let me ask a question
Yes.
about the previous screen. So select an instance type that is supported in your region. Is that pulled dynamically?
Again, it's polled and populated. So it's what we discovered, not right this second.
So, but what does that warning warn us of then specifically?
What will happen is if I pick something, I did this once where I picked something and it was not a supported, because it was like the disk and the instance type didn't go together, and it
But you don't
bombed out.
correlate that automatically.
So, but what happens is it fails right away. It says, I'm sorry, those two aren't supported. I don't know if this is just a polite warning to somebody that says, hey, just remember, the next step when we start correlating stuff, it's going to break.
Well, I guess the point is, that shouldn't be needed. You can query and find out which instance types are available in that region.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we're going to find out a step later.
Yeah, I think what's happening here is that certain instance types are not available in all regions.
Yeah, we have customers all over the world, so whether it's China or Europe or...
If this is a static list, then obviously it'll check and it'll then tell you that.
I see that, so that's in a scenario where that should be dynamic, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then again, this is the basic mapping, just verifying what we have from a mapping standpoint. We support multiple NICs. We don't support multiple IPs on multiple NICs yet, but we support multiple NICs. So here we go. Again, the fields will be pre-populated, but I'll run through all the steps. So this was one that had three 3 VMs in it. Sorry, these guys are living in the cloud, so I can't update the assets on this one. Boy, I really boobed, haven't I? Sorry.
Edit this out of the posted video.
Yeah. There we go. So we allow people, a lot of things that comes from customers, networks change. Don't let me run through the whole thing, just let me change networks, especially when they start off with different mappings. We provide the ability to have 2 sets of mappings today. So a rehearsal mapping, so that you can bring up an entire data center in a bubble, test arbitrarily long, and destroy it and not impact your recovery points because we haven't stopped the data movement and it won't let you touch. And we dynamically attach to and create the workloads to attach to those alternate vSwitches, VLANs, IP addresses, and so forth. But again, I'm going to, customize, edit the whole thing. So here we are, back to here. This one has 2. This one I had picked, it was AWS. I had picked the fact that this was that type of bucket. Now I'm going to configure all the data movement policies. So we're picking, so here's a multiple things. So you can either apply to all or individually pick stuff. Again, this is where APIs are really going to come to play when I can't be picking 20 different pull downs later on. Again, let the customer know what the networks are going to look like. Here's the ability where you can apply customizations. So, hey, I want production, different sets of IPs for production, and I want different IPs for rehearsals. Again, it depends what the customer wants. These pairings are done ahead of time, so we will discover all the active all the active networks out there, and then let people like, this is one from this data center. Here's how it should map: A to B, A to B, A to B prime, A to B prime, and so we'll pre-populate that. Again, customizations on workflow about, hey, do I want to continue if there's something that fails with IP? This is a customer request. And then another customer request was, depending on what they're doing, some customers didn't want to reestablish connection back to the data center. They loved the fact that we automated the heck out of everything so that when the machine was up and live, replication was already going back the other way, no matter what the technology was. And so it was completely done, no user interaction. They said, well, no, there's certain use cases where I want to pause and maybe do something. And so we give them chances to pause the workflow. And when the workflows are paused, there's a trap sent or an email sent, and they can log in and acknowledge and keep going. So here's my final setup, and I give it a name. And a lot of the work goes on is, since this is already recognized that this was an edit and not brand new, there would be a few more boxes here about searching for certain objects, grabbing objects in the target to prepare for a replication. Notification services on either end, generating the workflow. So what does the workflow look like? We store the workflows ahead of time so that all we're really doing in a time of need is executing these workflows. So that's what a customer would see generally. Now let me do something a little more interesting. And I will go ahead and now you can see I have this one particular application is already living in AWS. I migrated these things back and forth, tested the heck out of this last couple of days. So I did a bunch of migrations to be able to populate reporting later on. So this one I just left, the fact, hey, there it is. This one's actually sitting in AWS. So I can go ahead and click off, stop, start. I'll do a migrate back and bring it back on-prem. And then you'll see what the workflow looks like. This is a warning. This is something where customers, because of how we're doing things, we have to coexist with VMware in this particular use case. So when customers do things like void storage vmotion, we say, please, we support it when things are fine and static, but when you're making large changes, don't perform it for our gateways because we have all this mapping of all these objects. And so if they do a storage vmotion, some of the objects might not necessarily map properly. So we would just warn them. But we do support vMotion on-prem. We support snapshots, DRS, storage vMotion. So we do not get in the way of the on-prem VMware secret sauce.
So why not just put them in a separate folder or exclude it somehow? So
It has to deal with how we are maintaining Dismapping. I don't know why they can't get around that right now, but right now they cannot. We tell customers as part of the instructions for how to best do this is to make sure that our infrastructure is not allowed to be moved. So, hey, see these VMs? They're just VMs. Hey, don't do storage vMotion on these VMs, just disable it, or don't put it in any resource group for management. And so, but we just warn people, hey, hopefully you did this, but don't do it. But yes, we tell customers, exclude our machines from VMware secret sauce. You can move everything else. Don't move our infrastructure while this is going on. Later on, you want to rebalance. Okay, go ahead and rebalance. But don't do it while a rebalance of our stuff while it's going on. So it's finished. Click to view. A bunch is going on. I'm going to show you real quick, though, what it looked like in AWS. So here's what it looks like in Amazon right now. Everything labeled T1 is my lab. So you can see I'm already stopping those virtual machines. There's my lab infrastructure. There's the brain. Here's a worker bee. Here's the replication appliances down here. So those are the machines as they exist in somebody's console. This is what they would see. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to switch back because not much other than them being deleted and showing, get that red mark with it expired, right? And they sit there for a long time, and it depends on what's going on in that region before they disappear out of your console.
while this is running, a quick question. So you're saying these T1 machines are the infrastructure that you require.
Right.
For this environment to function. Also T2 ones or just?
Oh, no.
T1?
I'm sorry. There's somebody else. There's another. There's actually. This is actually something similar is actually going on in Sao Paulo right now, I think. And so there's a bunch of guys in Sao Paulo who are running. So they're in the same account.
Right.
But they're running their own infrastructure. So T2 is some of their stuff.
Right. But T1 is the same.
Yeah. So
that you will definitely
those machines are mine. That's my infrastructure. And then if you were to see other things like disks and stuff like that, they're all labeled.
Because I'm just looking at that all of them are M4 2 extra large. Yeah. Have you actually worked out what the cost is for it to run for, say, a month?
I personally have not. It's something I don't know if we give guidance to customers on here's typical cost. Do you know?
And is this the typical configuration that you would run? Because that would be a fair amount.
So again, we are doing a lot of work. Again, it's because we're automating everything. We're managing and looking and seeing a lot of things. I can't give you a paycheck answer. Sorry, I don't know if that's the minimum or the maximum or just the recommended.
It would be good to know first of all, and also if it's one instance only. What happens when one of these instances die for whatever reason? Okay, so for the Resiliency Manager, you can have multiple if you wanted. There's also one on-prem. You can operate from either. Right. But when people go into cloud, we tell people you should have one at least data center, so you do have a complete failure. The other one can be the brain and do everything. There's the little state that there is that's maintained, they're kept consistent. There's a Cassandra Database doing its thing and keeping objects up to date. Right. So that I can. So when I log into one and log in the other, everything's the same except when I list data centers, the order changes because my home data center lists first, the one I'm logged into. But other than that, there's no difference as far as what a customer sees and what they can do. So we tell people, hey, if you're going from on-prem to cloud, you can probably get away with one in each.
We have customers who put, one in each different resiliency zones. So again, this is, we don't do anything proactively. There's nothing proactively done. This is not clustering state magic where everything's proactive and it's immediate. We automate the heck out of anything, but only after somebody says, do something. Right? We're not here to be proactive. That's state management, the clustering. So nothing breaks from a customer standpoint if my stuff breaks, other than replication, which is, by the way, that's one of the reasons why AWS said, hey, it'd be really nice if you add this option, gives you more resiliency of your infrastructure in our place.
So when you go to restore your VMs, can you add special tags to them so you know that it was recovered from Veritas? Or?
So some things are tagged. It'll say, hey, this snapshot created by rehearsal. Okay. So basic tag and tape, but it's just our tags, no control. That is a customer request. Hey, let me add, give me a place to add tags so that when I create and delete objects, I have a better way, because I may do other things, or I may want to have accounting based on tag. There's tag's a big thing in cloud. So there's accounting stuff, measurement stuff based on tags. But right now, things are tagged, hey, this is a rehearsal machine. So if this had been the other way, and this was the rehearsal side, these would say that rehearsal. So you'd see that. If it was they're probably gone right now.
We have,
you'll see that this is tagged from what it is.
we have a question coming in from Twitter.
Sure.
Someone's asking if the UI is, responsive, able to connect through the internet to it, so you can actually start restores.
Yeah, from anywhere. I mean, I'm here. Like it's not iPhone compatible interface, touch interface, but there is no restriction on where you're connecting as long as you have. We tell the customer these ports have to be open for communications. Mm-hmm. Here's your security, but that's within the infrastructure. And this is just I just hit an address, and up it came. So as long as I had connectivity, I can do it from anywhere. Yeah.
And the UI would work on, say, an iPad.
Yes, I'm not sure how well it paints. It's not specific driven. Mm-hmm. That's been a request. Is maybe you should give us something at least some type of interface that's a little that's UI that's platform specific. Yep. But today it's just as long as it's a Chrome.
Is there a plan to create a mobile app?
I don't know of any. Alok or Joan, have you heard anything about mobile access? There was a customer's
You're talking about the VRP console, or?
Yeah, mobile access. In other words, give me a pretty mobile thing that's mobile specific, so that it paints nice, so that I can be driving, pull over the highway, and go.
Yeah. So the use case here is failures happen at the worst of times, right?
Right.
So if you're at the beach, you don't want to go back home. You want to
that job.
Use your phone, right?
Yeah, and you've already stated that it happens only when the user does something.
Right.
Exactly.
So.
No, I agree. I that's. Put that as a suggestion, and I'll clear the field.
I take your feedback.
Yeah. So you can see, by the way, so when for all the machines that were on-prem, you can see we allocated storage. This is the storage that we're writing to. And you can see they're all labeled based on their original workload name on the primary. If I do rehearsal, you'll see when I go to snapshots, you'll see a bunch of snapshots show up, and it says snapshot created during Ford Resiliency. Because we create a snapshot and let you play with that, but these guys are still being written to.
But there is a way to kind of tie it back.
Yeah, but customers said they want it dynamic. They want to do their own. So yes, it's there, but they want their own. Yeah. And I can understand that for accounting purposes, at the very least. Charge back, all that good stuff. Okay. I'm going to flip back to the console again and just show you the workflow that happened. It's a pretty extensive workflow. So stopping, unregistering, removing any traces of the VM from a network. There's a bunch of replication things that happen, so we're discovering, hey, what's the status of both sides? A note about design is we never assume anything when it comes to an action. So we do a lot of little bitty work here and there, registering and unregistering, checking replication, checking it again, at different steps along the way. Because we don't know what's happened in the environment. We don't know what happened at the time somebody hit and said go. So you see, there's actually, I don't know how many steps there end up being. There's 8, 9, 10, but if I expand it all out, some of them, there might be 50 or 60 or 80 steps that are going on to take up workloads and see all the various things. So state issues. So again, trying to deletes. There is when you see things in a row, I don't like it. It's if I have 5 assets, I see 5 sets of things at each time. This was getting rid of any trace of our bit mapper. Deleting storage. So stopping replication. So again, we're always checking hey, did I miss any bits? Is there a chance to get more bits back to the other site before I consider instantiating at the other side? Because again, the workloads, by the way, the workloads never exist. AWS doesn't know about a Linux box, doesn't know that there's an operating system on it. VMware doesn't know that it exists because we're writing to it in native format attached to our appliance. So it's only until we finish all the customization and boot it and do the final register that the virtualization technology even knows that it exists. And it's for all kinds of smart reasons, right? It's for cost, it's for EULAs, for software, it's all kinds of things. Modifying, there's a lot of replication validation going on.
So what about like VMware tools? VMware tools would be on your VM.
So yes, that helps us. Yes, so that's a requirement for VMware technologies, particularly for on-prem, with things like instead of us polling all the time, waiting for them to talk to us, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is once you get it into AWS, you no longer need that. So is that something that your process then?
No, what we're doing is we got to remember what it looked like in case the stuff goes away. Right. So if it goes away and you build a bunch of ESX servers, I have to remember its VMware configuration. So I can, when I tell it to do a resync, there's VMware objects that have to be created. Yeah. So pools and VMDK names and all the paths, everything has to come back. So we have to recreate everything from scratch when that side fails. So and those kinds of things are stored as objects in our database, so we can bring them back. Again, there's a lot of attaching and detaching. I have to deal with us, like customize IP settings over and over again, making sure that things are actually going to work and boot until at the very end, I have a booted machine. You can see it's start and stop end times. That took 9 minutes about going from one place to another. And what we have funny, we have found that because of all the work we're doing to guarantee things, migrates take a little bit longer, but for takeovers, happen a lot faster because we're no longer worried about the state at the other place. So we've migrated data centers 23 minutes with one operator, click and go. That's what we've gotten customers down to. One operator, 23 minutes, a tier 1, 16 levels of dependencies, hundreds of workloads, type of thing. And that's typical. I mean, that's not a typical customer. That's quite complicated, but that's what they needed. They needed automation to no user intervention other than click go.
You said hundreds of workloads.
Hundreds of workloads, 16 levels of dependencies. So this has to happen, and this command has to kick off, and that database has to finish recovering before I can start this other thing. And and this was that happened. That one I know because I was involved a little bit. It was a mix of physical and virtual. So they had it's very complicated. Legacy stuff, new stuff. It was a money-making regulatory requirement to be able to prove, and not just prove that they can recover, but they have to prove they can move it and actually run. So they don't rehearse anymore. They actually just migrate because they're required from a regulatory standpoint to actually run in the other data center. So they rehearse unit testing, rehearsing, but then once a quarter, whenever the regulatory requirement is, they do a migrate and they migrate the whole thing. Okay, so that's pretty typical from that standpoint. This is of what a virtual business service looks like, and you can see what, not say how complicated can it be, but what it might look like. soon as it comes up. This is building a dynamic map. Here we go. Because these can be arbitrarily complex. So there's the idea that, hey, I'm going to do one thing, then these two are going to go, and then I'm going to finish. They can be arbitrarily complex, different paths. The idea that I may have a start order that's one way, stop order that's another way, and it could change depending on where I am doing my work from. Whether I'm either on-prem, starting and stopping, rehearsing, starting and stopping, or actually migrating back and forth. Maybe one last thing I want to show, just from a user experience standpoint. It's been a little bit of a complaint that you're not quite as simple as everybody else. And of course, once they see what we do, that helps. But the initial, that first thing that a customer sees, it should be easier. So we've done a few things. One is when the customer actually pulls software, we give them the ability to select a use case. And then that will pull down the bits if they want to, and then we automate as much as possible so the bits are actually sucked into their, say, their virtual infrastructure.
I work a lot in the federal space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times we get vendors that come in and basically want to schmooze the government client, and a lot of it's not necessarily technical stuff that they're talking about. So I think to kind of get a better understanding of the overall picture of this product you've been talking about, give me an idea of what you would tell a government client, or any client for that matter, in a meet and greet session where you sit down and really try to describe yourself, I guess, in like an elevator pitch. Like, what do you do in that approach?
Yeah, so I try to convince folks, number one, what things should be. So a lot of folks push back. My biggest competition is mindshare and status quo. It's not actually other products. So I try to establish, number one, what you need, but to convince them, hey, what is needed in general. You haven't given me a chance to tell me what your problem is, but if I don't know what your problem is, the idea that the automation of everything, the entire coverage of your infrastructure, the ability to use rehearsals as an example to get a better ROI. If you can't measure something, the ROI is by default 0, and no executive, no customer likes that. So the idea that I'm going to run this every day. My customers who've had this product and my previous resiliency products, they actually have taken way past just doing, rehearsing once a quarter, once a weekend. They've actually changed their change control process. They don't close a change until they've actually run a rehearsal. So the idea that as I'm changing my environment, I automate this all the time, I get a feedback that says things are good. That's the nirvana that my customer wants. That's what I try to share with the customer, that we provide. The ability that will give you the confidence to change, because you can see everything all the time. 10 minutes before you do a change, do a rehearsal. Did everything work fine? Okay, do your change. Did it still work? Now you can go to home and sleep. You don't have to wake up Monday morning and find out that you broke 1,000 things. Also, the ability to test changes. So using your I hate the word, DR infrastructure, your resiliency infrastructure, as a place to do dev, test, QA. I'm a huge fan of money spent should be an investment in IT. If it's not, you shouldn't do it. So let's show you an ROI. Let's help you get money out of that investment. So don't let it sit there until bad things happen. Use it every day. That actually wins quite a bit, that idea of using that infrastructure every single day in a way that makes sense. And to the executive, to be honest, they can get budget because they can actually prove things. Getting DR budget spend is tough because it doesn't do anything for most customers. But when I can prove, you can use it for testing. It can be automated, so it doesn't add work. It actually saves work. That's that short elevator value prop.
So, apologies if you've already answered this. I don't remember from before. Do you have a release schedule or product update schedule roadmap thing right now for like when your next couple of releases or releases over the next year, for example?
So we were close to 90 days for the first 3 years. And that was there was this, a lot of focus, a lot of, some early adopters who really drove us to, okay, you need one more feature, one more feature, one more feature. So every 90 days, we're more like 120 days now. So not, not every quarter, but 3 times a year is about, Alok, is that pretty close? More like 3 times a year instead of 4 times a year? Yeah, and then yes, so 3.2 is a few months ago, because of a bunch of things that went on and other product matching development cycles. We actually have a drop coming up just a few months, so next month, and then we also sometimes make a special drop when, for example, when our other products have their new APIs get exposed and we can take advantage of, then we'll do a drop to support that other launch. Makes sense. If my data protection can now do something else or gives me an API that I can manage, for example, one thing we don't do today is my customer who's using cloud as a data protection target, well, today they cannot instantiate that workload, even though they got the data there. It's just dumb storage. It's not very useful. I mean, it's good because they could save money because it may be going to Glacier or Azure, the new cloud storage tier, but they can't actually do anything with it other than restore it back on-prem. So we've changed our data protection product to have some more APIs so that we'll orchestrate the actual recovery based on that image. And so then there'll be an extra drop when those things come. But in general, 120 days right now.
So maybe a follow-up question to that release schedule. What's a feature that has dropped in the recent releases that you're particularly proud of?
Well, these were customer requests, and I was surprised it took so long, and that was STIM provisioning. So don't move stuff that has nothing on it. So before, since we were just using the filter, and so our filter, we would also scan that disk and just start grabbing all the bits and taking it. If it had nothing on it and zeros, we were shipping it.
Right.
And so per one of our customer requests, and now a lot of customers are very happy. That was a 3.11, so just a few months ago where we made that change. More dynamic, more usability. So the last couple of releases has been about usability. Not what we can do, but how well it does it and how less disruptive. So the idea of those replication appliances can scale out. You're gonna have lots of them. Well, what if I had to make changes? What if I want to upgrade? So automation. Push a button and you don't have to do anything. The appliance will rip one out, save its personality, put another one in, apply the personality, and you have the new version of the appliance. That kind of stuff. Changing things live. So without having to resync was something that just happened. So I do have a major infrastructure failure of my part. Pull the stuff out, redirect dynamically. It's not dynamic, that's going to happen. Hey, I've got 6 pairs between these 2 data centers, right? It should be automatic. So it will be automatic in the next one. Now we can give them the option to do it very quickly. They don't have to go to a cliché, they don't have to be gurus. But shortly we'll say, hey, I got 6 pairs, 1 drops out, just redirect. Right. And give me an alert, but redirect. So that's been an evolution of usability. So for the last year and a half, it's really been at usability and scale in the enterprise. So as customers consume it and bang at it, okay, right, we need to focus on that. You need to focus on the idea of, hey, I should be more dynamic in these certain areas. That has been the major focus, not a new target or a new replication technology, or it's been make it easier, and more hardy.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you ever notify your customers before a release comes out just so they can prepare?
Yeah, so we have a customer CPAP program, customer engagement program, where customers can sign in. So we have many products. So either they pick by product or by idea. And whenever there's going to be a sprint that might feature that thing that they care about or that release they care about, they get invited to join. So that's an automated process. So if you're a customer already in non-disclosure agreement, you can go into our portal and say, I want to know anything about VRP. If there's going to be some discussion about prioritization, I want to be involved. So customers get to vote, thumbs up, thumb down. And then they also get, of course, notified ahead of time. We also have an early engagement. Hey, we need 20 customers who want to put this in their labs, not in production, but go ahead and kick the tires. And that's very common. We do that with all of our products. So every release, some of the minor releases for this product, since they were happening quite quick, we didn't have to worry about that. It was just the sprint process that we cared about. But then for the next, for a 4.0 release, there'll definitely be there's always a customer early access where people get to kick the tires, talk with engineering, This doesn't necessarily require fly to site. Some of our other products might, but again, a high touch experience for the customer.
Okay.
And that's for all products, yeah.